I'm Adelaide Jean Jen Ackmeyer, but you can just call me Addie. That's what everyone else does. Most of my family is buried here at the Greenlawn Abbey, and I joined them in 2010. Let me tell you a little bit about my family. My mother, Jean, whom I'm named after, was a school teacher. She raised me to focus on academics. I don't mean to brag, but I did have a brilliant mind. I graduated summa cum laude from Ohio State University. Oh, I'm sorry. That's right. The Ohio State University. I moved on to Radcliffe, where I also received high honors. One of my professors and I participated in a groundbreaking study on speed reading. It took a little bit of practice, but eventually I was able to take my finger across a piece of paper and read faster and faster. Oh, it was such fun those days. In World War II, I married a dashing and handsome pilot named Robert Mitchell. Oh, how he did make my heart beat faster. One time, he tried to get my attention on campus by taking his B-17 and buzzing over the Theta House. That was not the wisest thing to do. You see, there was a parts shortage, and so there was only scheduled one pilot in the air that day. Of course, they knew who had done the buzzing. It was a rocky marriage, I'm sad to say. We were both only children, and we had parents who were very doting. We each just assumed that the other would take care of everything. We eventually divorced, but not before having two lovely daughters, Cynthia and Janet, both of whom are still alive today. As I said, my mother raised me to focus on academics, which means that she didn't really prepare me for domesticity. I just really didn't have a clue nor a desire to learn how to keep a house. Oh, my mother was horrified. You see, she loved to clean. And so every time she came over to the house, that's what she proceeded to do. And she started with the girls. She would grab each one by the ear, take them into the bathroom, and scrub them until they almost cried. The poor dears. Well, then she'd move into the kitchen and go to the refrigerator, where she soon discovered, much to her chagrin, many science projects developing in there. I wasn't a science teacher. It was simply moldy food. One time, to her horror, what she thought was spilled Bosco syrup on the countertop and floors was actually swarms of ants. Germs just didn't bother me. I figured what didn't kill you made you stronger. Well, my daughters, those poor lovely little girls, they soon discovered that if they wanted any clean laundry, they were going to have to fend for themselves. Then there were my grandparents, Dr. Joseph and Frankie Berry. Oh, they were the salt of the earth, and my mother said that Grandpa Berry, he was the heart and soul of the whole family. Everyone adored him wherever he went. He worked very hard. He had put himself through college and then on to medical school. His practice was located on West Broad Street for over 50 years. My grandfather had all these lovely little sayings, things that were little quips and words of wisdom, much like a modern-day Benjamin Franklin. Let me see if I could think of one. Oh, I know. He would say, the key to good health is to eat breakfast like a king, lunch like a prince, and supper like a pauper. What else was another one? Oh, that's right. Do it now and forget it, or you'll forget it and not do it. I know those don't sound very original, but to us, they were wonderful sayings. Mother said that she and Aunt Flossie, when they were little girls, would write these sayings down and post them on the wall in their bedroom, much like young girls would do with posters of Hollywood movie stars. Well, that brings us back to me. As I said, I joined my family here in 2010, but I was living in California when I passed. My daughters, however, knew that I wanted to be with my family, and so they brought me back here to the Abbey. However, I did not arrive in the usual fashion. I was shipped here via FedEx. Well, I could go on and on. I have all kinds of time. However, you are out of time in listening to me. I hope you enjoy hearing all of the others at our lovely Abbey. I've enjoyed getting to know them. Thank you so much for visiting.
Roll up, step right up and see the greatest show on earth. The greatest show on earth. Yes, I'm Louis Sells from the world-famous Sells Brothers Circus. That's right, the greatest show on earth. You've heard it before. Where have you remember that from, huh? Oh, somebody might say those Ringling Ding Dong Brothers? Yes, well, we eventually sold our Sells Brothers Circus to the Ringling Brothers. But we were one of the greatest circus acts in the entire world, from 1872 all the way up to 1932. Now, I came from a large family, 5 brothers, and we all went and fought in the Civil War. But sadly, one of my brothers passed away. He died in Andersonville prison. A terrible time in our country's history and an awful place. One day, Ad, who loved to mingle with the Bohemians and see all these interesting things around Columbus, he said to us, why don't we go to the circus? The circus is in town. And so we did. We went there. And, Ephraim, who was the smart business guy amongst our brothers, he said, gosh, there's a lot of people here. Maybe we should bring our auction to the people here. And so we thought, what a great idea. Of course, Ad was thrilled with that. He could mingle with all the circus folks. And so we started to follow the circus around and set up our auction in the same site as the big tent. And it was very successful. And then, shortly thereafter, Ad came up to us. He was our ideas guy. He said, you know what? I bet you we could run this circus just as well as they're doing. We could do better than them. We saved up all of our money. $35,000 we gathered together, and we bought the circus. Now, it was just a small circus, just a tent and some wagons and a couple of specialty acts. But we put on the show, and our first show was a tremendous success. We pulled in $1,540 that night, a great success. So we decided we'd take the show on the road. One of the exciting stories we have was when we took the show out west through Illinois, and we were looking at the latest shows that other circuses were putting on at the time. There was a Wild West show, and so we cast our own Wild West show, and Indians and cowboys, and so we managed to get some Indians, but we fell afoul of the law because there was a law out at the time that said you were not allowed to employ Native Americans in circuses or in entertainment, and we found that out a little bit late in the game, so we had to quickly make a change, and so we went out and we outsourced the role of the Indians to a bunch of Mexicans. Well, after my brother died in 1905, my heart just wasn't in it anymore. I was the only one left who was running the circus, and so I decided I'd sell the circus, and we sold to Barnum and Bailey brothers. And they, in turn, turned it around and sold it right away to those Ringling Ding Dong Brothers. But I still loved the circus. Circus was part of my life. And one day I decided I wanted to go and see the Wild West show one more time. And so my wife, Rhoda, who's here next to me in the Abbey, she took me to the big tent. And I enjoyed the show so much. I was overwhelmed by it, actually. And that evening, I could hardly get up out of my seat. They had to help me home. And, later that night, I slipped into a coma. and I never recovered. I passed away just the next day, and I was buried in the Greenlawn cemetery. But when my wife Rhoda passed away, they buried her here in the Abbey, and they had me moved so that I could lay next to her. And so, it's very quiet in here, not quite the same as it is in the wild and loud experience of the circus. And so I enjoy the quiet too. It gives me time to reflect on what a wonderful life I had, and the times when I would step out into that light and feel that I was right where I needed to be. And I hope that you'll come back and join me here again many times, and that you'll get to feel that same feeling, that you are stepping into that light and feeling the warmth of it on you. And come back and visit us again. Thank you.
My name is David Todd Gilliam, but my friends call me Todd. My parents, William and Mary Elizabeth, were both born in Virginia. Now, we moved to Ohio in 1830, and I was born in Hebron in 1844. We were a bit of a nomadic family, moved around Newark, Hebron, Millersport. And when I was 16 years old, that's when the Civil War hit. Now, even though my parents were both from Virginia, Southerners, they wanted nothing to do with the South. They stood firmly with the Union Army. And being a 16-year-old young man, I was excited to fight for the North. But I was weak, I was pale, I was scrawny, short. And I thought the only way I could make it into the Army was to be a Teamster. Now, Teamsters today drive trucks, truck driving union, and back then it was the horses, teams of horses that drove the carriages, hence the Teamsters. But I knew absolutely nothing about horses. I love to read. I read a lot of manuals, a lot of books, got my hands on as many things as I could. But I really wasn't officer material. Now, the way that they chose an officer back then, a non-commissioned officer, was they would have everybody line up in a line, and they would say, "Son, if you want to be an officer, you take a step forward." And I just stood there until somebody pushed me. I was now an officer. Now, fought for about a year and got shot through the shoulder out the back and captured by the enemy. The rest of my regiment had no idea what happened to me and just thought I had died in battle. Shortly after that, my regiment was marching through my hometown in a parade. And my daddy was looking for me and saw my company and couldn't find me. He called over one of my fellow soldiers and said, "Son, where's Todd? Where's Todd Gilliam, my boy?" They assumed I was dead, and that's what they told my dad. I can't imagine what my father went through that day. What he didn't know was that I had escaped from capture and was making my way back home. And I remember that day when I stood up on the front porch. My daddy came out of the house. Best day for both of us. But the wound, the gunshot was festering, was infected. I contracted typhoid fever on top of that and was in really bad shape. So they sent me to Camp Chase here in Columbus to recover. In fact, Camp Chase is still around today. Just a portion of it is, right at Sullivan and Hague Road. Now, my wound was so bad, my condition was so bad, it took over 30 years for me to fully recover. Now, when I was well enough, I did go to school, studied business for a year, but business wasn't for me. So I decided to become a doctor. Now, back then, when you studied medicine, it was illegal to practice on cadavers. Commonplace today. But back then, you'd be thrown in prison for working on a dead body. So what did I do? Well, I did what most medical students did. We dug up bodies, grave robbing, and practiced on them. I was offered the chair of pathology and chair of physiology at the Ohio Medical College of Columbus. Later, I accepted the chair of gynecology of Starling Medical College. Gynecology was actually my specialty. In fact, many instruments and many procedures that are still used today, I first invented. I was probably best known for the Gilliam uterine suspension. What that is you Google it. So, now, Lucinda and I did raise a family. We had 3 children. We had Myrtle, our daughter, son Robert, and son Earl. Myrtle married, stayed here in Columbus. Robert, he moved out to California, studied business. Earl, though, followed in my footsteps and became a doctor. We had a vacation home out at Buckeye Lake. And in July 1923, when I was 70 years old, I was struck with paralysis. And even though I had miraculously recovered from the gunshot wound of typhoid fever, there was no miraculous recovery this time. And October 2nd of that year, I died. They buried me out at the Greenlawn cemetery, and eventually, after my wife passed away and was brought here to the Greenlawn Abbey, the irony of all ironies happened. The old grave robber, my body was dug up and brought here to the Abbey, where I now lay here to rest with my wife, my daughter, son Earl, several of my grandchildren, all here at the Abbey. Lots of stories to tell. Lots of stories. So, thank you for visiting.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming to the Abbey. My name is Harry Thurston. Have you ever heard of me? Huh? No? Now, don't confuse me with my younger brother, Howard Thurston, the great magician. You know, the one with the biggest magic show anyone's ever seen? Huh? Yeah, bigger than that, Copperfield nowadays. Yeah. You see, I happen to be Howard's older brother, and shall we say, more interesting. You see, if it wasn't for me, Howard, he'd have been nothing. Now, Howard, he had the gift of gab, okay? He was a barker. He was able to pack the people into the sideshows there like sardines. The people fell in love with his voice. It was amazing. It was like the Pied Piper. Now, myself, of course, I was a businessman, okay? Kind of an entrepreneur. I could see things, you know? I had the ability to see where money is going to be made, so I joined the circus. Ringling Brothers. Remember them? Oh, yeah. That was a big company right there. I become an advance man for them. Yeah. I was running the dime museums right there. One night, you know, I was laying there and I thought, hey, wait a minute. Why don't I take this to Columbus? So I hopped the train without a second thought, went right over to Columbus and opened a whole series of these dime museums. Yeah. Y'all don't know what a dime museum is, do you? Well, you see, it's a sideshow in a storefront. Get it? Dime goes a long way. You get to see like freaks, a unicorn, maybe see a mermaid swimming around there in the fishbowl. Oh, yeah. Gentlemen, you know what mermaids wear when they're swimming. Nothing. Well, it was a good time. Stayed there, 20 years. Wow. Born in 67, that's 1867, died in 1941. Amazing. Yeah, that 20 years in Chicago was a good time. Howard at that time, you know, what he did was he went and opened up his own magic show. And I kind of piddled around with it a little bit, but he was pretty good. That Howard, he had a lot of polish. That thing that I was kind of rough around the edges. But I had money. You see, those sideshows, they made a lot of money for me. So Howard, when he wanted to open up his magic show, well, he come to me. And so I bankrolled his show. That's right. Yeah. Well, see, I had to take care of the girls, those pretty little assistants. And then I had to take care of all the transport, the trains, gosh, payroll, and even one time a boat to take them all the way over into Europe. You believe that? Took that show into Europe. And of course I get a telegraph or a phone call. Hey, Harry, I need money. I'm like, for crying out loud, Howard, you're a terrible businessman. You keep losing your money on these great big ideas and wonderful things that don't pan out. Don't do that. I'm done supplying your money. You're going to have to find another investor. Yeah. Yeah, well, of course, that's where we parted, but it was only financial. We're brothers, you know what I'm saying? And then one day, craziest thing, I got really scared. You see, because I got a telegraph, a message that Howard had a stroke. I couldn't believe it. My little brother with a stroke? I was kind of devastated. Of course, you know, with his girl running the show with him and his wife, they just detested me. They didn't like me at all. So it kind of kept me away. Sure enough, he goes home, back into Florida. He had a nice little home there. We both did. Up and dies. And to top it off, they barred me, his brother. They barred me from the funeral. Crazy. I don't know what the matter with them was. It's stupid. Well, you know, I got to thinking about it. I'm getting kind of tired of all this pushing and shoving in the showbiz, running it out and picking up and putting down. It was just terrible. After a while, I was getting older, and I thought I need a life that's peaceful and calm. So what I did was I sold the show to Will Thorne. Yeah. Made a pretty penny there. Enough to retire. Yeah. The only mistake I made was I retired to Indiana. There ain't nothing in Indiana. And sure enough, I died in just like a couple of years. You know, if there was something I could pass on to you, I'd tell you this. Money's going to buy you fun, and you'll have provision. It's good. But, you're probably best to invest more in your family. Love them. You'll be a richer person for it. Okay, enough of that. I understand. It's too mushy. I'll tell you what I'll do for you. Next year, I'm going to have Howard talking to you, okay? And I'll sit in the peanut gallery, and you can listen to two brothers bicker. See you next year.